All right, Kevin back with you with another episode of the Million Dollar Relationships Podcast. And today I am here with Rich Christiansen. Rich, it is so awesome to have you here today. Welcome.
Oh, it's a thrill to be here, Kevin. I'm so glad we reconnected after these 15 years or so.
It has been a little bit of time for sure. And you know, I got to give I got to give two shout outs for this because it was Garrett Gunderson who originally connected you and I way back when. Like you said, I think, yeah, that was about 15 years ago, 2008, 2009. And then most recently, it was Brandon Allen, who after Brandon and I did an interview for this podcast, Brandon was like, Kevin, you gotta interview Rich for your podcast. And so Brandon reconnected us, and here we are. And I'll tell you, you know, for a podcast, Rich, that is all about relationships, what an amazing testament that is right there, that here you and I are getting reconnected after all this time because of these relationships that we have between us and stuff. So I am just really excited to have this conversation with you today. And
Well, so am I. And what an important precipice conversation. Indeed, the greatest benefits in life, not only in depth of joy and satisfaction, but also, I think, from propelling businesses, if done in integrity, are the relationships.
yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, to start with, and to kind of set some context, because after getting reconnected with you and doing some snooping around and visiting your website and all that, I'm like, oh, Rich is doing some really cool stuff here that you weren't doing the last time you and I talked. Which, you know, when there's like a 12, 15-year span, that tends to happen. And so I am just really excited to just kind of get an update from you, as well as be able to share with everybody else, with our listeners. You know, so let's kind of start with like having you share a little bit about, you know, what you do, who you serve, what inspires you most about the work you guys are doing, the impact you're making, and we'll start there, Rich.
Great. Well, thank you for letting me spend 1 minute on that. I really am kind of an anomaly, a really strange beast, because I'm an electrical engineer that accidentally became a business guy and spent the first half of my career, as you're aware, in the corporate world, ran several of the largest companies here in the US, Mitsubishi Electric's PC division, about.com, got very frustrated with the corporate world, determined to take control of my own destiny. And so I think what most people know me for, and what I'm, if you use the word famous for, is it's my lean startup. I wrote several precipice books on the lean startup movement, including Zigzag Principle. In my career, I ended up founding or co-founded 52 businesses. 52 all started with $10,000 of capital or less. 19 were failures, but 17 became multi-million-dollar businesses. So that was a lot of the precipice of my business. But about 4 or 5 years ago, I had I mean, if you will call it, a come to Jesus a little bit, maybe more of a real a realization of the importance of what really, really deeply matters. And very fortunately in my life, what drove me out of the corporate world was the desire to stabilize, number one, my trust relationships, number two, my health, and most importantly, my family. And so about 4 years ago, I quit operating. I no longer run businesses in any shape, form, or fashion. And I'm actually helped solve some of the problems that I created with my lean startup movement. And that is helping entrepreneurs and successful individuals, businessmen, and families to understand and gain clarity are what are my values, and then how do I stabilize not only myself and but also my family. So most recently, I've been doing a lot of work with what's called the Legato family, which is a framework to help families stabilize, particularly at the key transitions, so they do not blow their entire family and their relationship up when they are provided money. And so helping focus on what truly wealth is, which is we are well. Wealth is not money. Wealth is we are well. So that's what I'm focusing on now. is stabilizing humanity through families and key relationships.
Gotcha. And so, Rich, I'm curious. So, in the work that you're doing now, are you serving primarily entrepreneurs, or because you came out of the corporate world as well? What does that look like?
No, it really is. It is primarily entrepreneurs that are
Okay.
engaging this, and oftentimes it's precipice events, right? As individuals are starting to accumulate a good amount of wealth and don't want to screw their family up. And I'll probably tell a little of that story later, or when they're getting ready to exit. And at exit's a pretty critical time that if you do not, most people run and race instantly to financial planning or constitution, but then that feels very disingenuous because they really don't have a platform to instill what got them there, which was the values.
Mm-hmm.
And if
Mm-hmm.
I could just quickly, the symbols on top of it, the rituals on top of it, the traditions on top of it, and the doctrine to stabilize any entity. And so we help them get firm roots in their family and in their personal life before they just run off and blow their life up.
Oh,
70% of all wealth is lost by the second generation, 90% by the third. And
wow.
so
Wow.
it's not a money problem, it's a values problem why that happens. So
Okay.
that's what I've been focusing on.
Okay. Wow, that's really fascinating. Okay. So, now that we've got a little bit of context set here, I'm going to reiterate the question for the benefit of the listeners. Rich, so have you ever been introduced to a person or persons that completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person or persons? And Rich, I'm just like really excited to hear your story around this topic of relationships.
Well, what a beautiful question. I can imagine anyone that's had success not being able to answer yes to that. And indeed, I was incredibly fortunate to not have one, not have two, but to have three precipice individuals in my life. And
Okay.
to this day, I get emotional a little bit, even thinking about them and that they would believe in me. Um, would you, I assume you now would like me to share who they are and how
Absolutely.
it happened?
Absolutely. Yes. I want to hear the stories on all three of them.
Well, let me start first of all by naming who the three individuals are.
Okay.
The first one is Alan Hall, and Alan Hall picked me out of the lineup when I was a snot-nosed 22-year-old kid that had $500, was a junior technician, and a Dodge Colt that had been totaled 3 times. And so he believed in me now, and he's still my mentor. And every time I get into a sticky situation, he provides me the context to go forward. I spoke to him last week with great encouragement. So Alan was the beginning and the ending. In
Okay.
between that, I've had 2 additional world-class mentors. The first, I think most people will recognize the name, as I was very fortunate to have Stephen Covey as
Okay.
one of my mentors, and one of my proudest accomplishments is one of the last. Well, he hadn't endorsed a book I think for 5 years prior or since, but he was the headline endorser of Zigzag Principle. So Stephen Covey had profound impact in my life on multiple ways. And the third was Dr. Peter Horn,
Okay.
also a remarkable individual. So those are the three individuals that, although I don't know what Rich Christiansen is, other than just like all humans, grateful to be here and very blessed. But those three individuals indeed saw something in me I didn't see in myself, loved, supported, stood by me, and helped vault me to levels that I never could have dreamed of as a snot-nosed kid growing up in a rural community where there were 2,000 of us if you counted the cows.
If you counted the cows, that reminds me of where I grew up when I was a kid. And well, let's I mean, I would love to hear a little bit more on each of these men, Alan, Stephen, and Dr. Peter Horn, and just kind of, how did those relationships come to be? What are some of the things that came from those that just really stand out for you? Because for me, what the goal has always been with this podcast is not just to give you know, entrepreneurs like you the opportunity to share your story and your experience around this topic of relationships and honor these people who have had such a profound impact on your life and on your business, but also for the listeners. I want, we are inspiring them through our conversations to just place an intentional focus on creating more real, meaningful, rewarding, and profitable relationships in their own lives. And I know that this is going to be no exception. We're going to come through in flying colors with this, and I'd love to give you the opportunity to just go into more detail on each of these three relationships.
I'd love to do that. And then I'd love to also share, I've worked a lot with entrepreneurs. Most of the big universities, I've judged the business pitch competitions, and the number one predictor of success of a young entrepreneur is getting a good mentor.
Mm-hmm.
If you're able to get a good mentor and build that relationship, then indeed that's the primary platform needed to vault your career. And then the question always comes to me from the students is, well, how do I build that? And I then share the story of how I got my first mentor.
Okay.
And I like what's called the value equation. So if I could do that, maybe that's how we best proceed.
Perfect. Perfect.
So as I mentioned earlier, I married my true love, a woman of my dreams. She was the youngest of 9 in a dairy farmer's family, and she self-sustained from the age of 14 years old. So very, very humble circumstances. I grew up in a home where my father was blind. He was an attorney, but blind, and also very humble circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
And we were just dead committed to make this work. And so I managed to save $500, managed to convince her to marry me. Our car was a Dodge Colt that had been totaled going on 4 times, and up we moved to go to university where we both got jobs. And I was working at a little dumb well, it wasn't a dumb, it was actually a very cool little early stage technology company, Network Computing, right when they were trying to connect PCs with Apples. And while working there, I was just a junior technician.
Okay.
And one day as I was going out, I wasn't the smartest by far. I've never been the smartest. Barely pulling B's at best in college. But boy, did I know how to work hard. And so I made it a point to really be conscientious in my work. And I was typically the last one out each night. So I was headed out one night, and there had been this conversation that this really important individual named Ray Norda was coming in, who owned this company called Novell. And I saw that the presentation looked like garbage. I mean, the floor was dirty, the cables were all over. So as my wife came in to pick me up in our Dodge Colt, I said, hey, honey, we got to clean this up. And so I cleaned them. She helped me. We cleaned the screens, tied down the cables, mopped the floor, cleaned everything up a little bit, spit shined it a little bit. It only took me 15 or 20 minutes. But did that and then left. And the next day, Ray Norda came in, and boop, they got the funding from him, and the company started to vault. Well, there was this miraculous individual that I loved this man. He was charismatic, he was tall, he was articulate, he wiggled his ears, he was funny, he engaged everyone, and he was a vice president at that point of sales. And somehow he figured out that I didn't tell anyone, but he supposed and figured out that I had been the one that had done that. And so this individual's name was Alan Hall. He was about, I think, 40 at that point. Okay. And so he figured out I'd done that. And he then assigned me to travel with him around the country to set up all his technology for presentations.
Oh.
And so along with that, we started getting along really, really well. And then he learned that, wow, Rich was actually pretty smart with technology. And sometimes he'd say some really funny, engaging things. So he let me start presenting. Next thing you know, I'm a manager. Then the next thing you know, I'm actually director of all of technical support of that company. Wow. And the company ended up going bankrupt. But while we were traveling, Alan would always say, if this doesn't work, I'm going to do this thing called temp reps. And he'd talk about how he was going to do a model. And sure enough, the company went bankrupt and failed, and I had to go get another job. But Alan then built temp reps into MarketStar that became a $1 billion company. So Kevin, my entire success and vault to having a world-class mentor came from cleaning a screen and mopping a floor.
Yeah. Wow. What a phenomenal story. So, some attention to detail there that ended up getting a big result, and you helped facilitate that, that then led to this relationship that has now, how many years has this relationship been in?
Well, I was 22 or 23 at the point. I'm now, I don't know, do the math. It's going on, it's 30 plus years.
Wow.
30 plus years. And I will make this statement that every critical impasse in my life, Alan, about every couple of years, we sit down, go to lunch, and he gives me the next roadmap. He provided one of the most valuable learnings in my life about 10 years ago called the prosperity equation. What you do when you get to a point of success and how you handle it so you don't destroy your life, and a stewardship to give back and serve humanity. And I followed that. I recently became chairman of a major university. Alan scripted exactly what I needed to do to have that occur. At every critical time where I get to a problem that, man, this is so complex, I don't know how to do it, I call Alan. He calls me his puppy. He says, "Oh, my puppy. Oh, I was waiting for you to get to that one. Yeah, that's a tough one." And then he never tells me what to do, but he gives me a couple of kind suggestions. I will tell you that Alan Hall is one of the greatest men that I've ever known, and I will be eternally grateful to Alan Hall. I think the key thing I'd like to highlight here, Kevin, is the value equation. Most people think that you get successful or make a bunch of money by running around and taking, or manipulating, getting super smart, and then contriving the market or something. And I've just found that fundamentally to be false. Intellectual capital, getting smart, then plus using that to serve your relationship capital is how you build enduring wealth and also significant launches. Not one time, well, one time in my life, I asked Alan Hall for something, one time and one time only. The rest of the time I've given and supported and loved, and he's equally given. When I was launching Zigzag Principle, I called up and says, "Alan, I hate to do it, but I have to ask for something." He says, "What, Rich, stop. Yes. Whatever it is, the answer is yes." And he ended up buying 1,000 Zigzag Principles and placing it in all the most significant entrepreneurs and leaders that there were in the state. And actually, the reason I became a national best-selling author was because of Alan's support.
Wow.
So, Alan Hall, if you listen to this, I love you. I'm grateful to you. I honor you. And thank you for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself.
Yeah. So now I feel inspired. And I've never asked anybody this question. I've asked versions of it, but not the way I'm going to ask it to you, Rich, because the way I'm going to ask it to you is based on what you've already shared. And so if you think about this long-term relationship that you and Alan have had all these years, and I can imagine there are many things that have transpired as a result of that relationship. And like you just said, him purchasing 1,000 copies of your book and just really, helping launch that, which is a big deal. But if you look back and over all that's happened all these years, and I want you to think of something, and I'm going to challenge you to think of something that maybe there's something that Alan doesn't even know about, or that might not realize, but that something that took place as a result of the relationship that you and Alan have, where you got to make, where a big impact was made. And hands down, that would have never happened if not for my relationship with Alan. And I'm adding that little caveat there where that, maybe this is something that Alan might not even know about yet. And I just wanted you to search and see what comes up for something like that.
Well, I got so many of them, I don't think we could do it in the hour that we have together. But the reality of it is the concepts of Zigzag Principle and the number of young men that I have mentored and impact their life, I believe, without being arrogant, but on equal gravity that Alan did mine. I've helped not maybe hundreds, but thousands of young entrepreneurs launch and fulfill their dream and destiny. If Alan Hall had not entered my life and believed in me, some of the lean startup modeling that I was so fortunate to be able to release and be public, that wouldn't have blessed the life. And I don't think there would have been the wealth and the control of lives established. That's one. The second is in the guidance that he helped provide me of how to contribute back. I'd mentioned this prosperity equation, and there's 5 pillars that he highlighted for me that upon all contribution reside. And I won't go through all of them, but I will hit one. One was higher education.
Okay.
He encouraged me to, Rich, take $5,000 and send it to a university of your choice, but it can't be a big fancy one. It needs to be ones that really you believe in. I did that. And he says, then what'll happen is they'll call you down. They'll ask you to give a lecture because they never get $5,000 checks. And when they do, you go down and you look for a way to contribute. Wow. And then when you find a great need, then you serve and contribute. And what they're going to do then is they're going to invite you to be on their board. And you never just go on the board because, Rich, you and I were chairs, not board members. And then you seek for a way to become the board chair. He telegraphed what happened at this university some 6 or 7 years before it happened. I gave the $5,000. They called me. I went down. I saw that their entrepreneurship program was anemic at best and deeply needed in this rural community. I sent up what was called the Entrepreneur Leadership Council, which now has one of the strongest entrepreneurship lean startup modeled in the Western United States. Hundreds, if not thousands, of businesses have been born out of that. Indeed, I didn't become a board member, but was the youngest chair. After 2 years, I was named the chair, named the existing sitting president of the university. And indeed, that was all enabled by the mentorship of one Alan Hall.
Wow.
And how did he know that? Because he'd traveled the path already. So he helped me avoid all the stupid things. I'm going to go back and mention one other critical thing he helped me avoid.
Okay.
In this prosperity equation, he highlighted to me how not to destroy and blow up your family. How he put the first $5 million of his wealth into his wife's name and says, never, never, ever risk that ever again, no matter what, and let her control it. And if you boof it or you do something stupid, you're out on the street. She gets to keep that because she went through this with you once. I did the same.
Wow.
And I think some of the precipice principles of, you don't meet very many billionaires that have not destroyed their family in a lot of carnage. Yeah. Alan Hall has not messed his life, his family up, and he modeled for me how to do the same. So I think even the legato content, which I think Stephen Covey was part of, modeled a lot through Alan Hall. So once again, Alan, thank you. And I hope I didn't go too deep there.
Well, you definitely did not go too deep. That was absolutely amazing, Rich. And I really appreciate you sharing all of that. And, you know, I mean, you're right, you know, because of these relationships that we have, you know, we get like, you know, I'm like, who knows how many businesses have been started and how many frontline people that you have impacted through your work over the years, but it's been a lot. And beyond that, you know, the spouses of those entrepreneurs, the families of those entrepreneurs, all the people that their businesses touched, all those lives of all those people that all those businesses served in some way. I mean, so the real impact of the work that you've done is absolutely massive. It's mind-boggling when we really start thinking about it in these terms, but that's the reality of it. And, you know, I really appreciate you sharing what you did because, you know, one of the huge things that has come up through hosting this podcast for the last couple of years is that, you know, through relationships and through service to and like you said, the intellectual piece coupled with the relationships, you know, we are able to make such a bigger impact together in collaboration, in co-creation than we could ever possibly think of making on our own. And you have just distilled that beautifully today. And so I want to thank you for that.
Well, thank you for the comment of making that. And the only correction I would make is I don't know it's about me. I really don't know it's about me. I've learned maybe how to get my ego a little bit lower and working on that, but it's largely just kind of filling what I was meant to do and taking your talents and then applying it. And then I think just this concept of gratitude and giving is such a critical component of it.
Yeah.
You know, I think that for me, had I not been a giver, I'm a giver. I'm a giver. I love to give. And I give. And I'm so grateful because it's come back to me in fold. Oftentimes people say, aren't you afraid about being used? And yeah, it sucks. It really sucks when you get used. And even if it's 6 out of 10 times, which it probably is, maybe 3's tit for tat, but for the one that really matters, the deep, deep ones that really matter, then it builds a level of trust and intimacy that you just can't deny. That's you know, right. I've been spending a lot of time focusing recently, particularly the last couple of years, of, are you doing the right thing? Are you doing the right thing? And I'd ask you, listening to this, are you doing the right thing? And if not, stop doing it and do the right thing. Yeah. But then there's a harder question that comes. And I think a key thing learned from all 3 of my mentors, and I'm really reflecting, am I doing the right thing for the right reason? And that gets a lot trickier. And if you're not, it's like, okay, give yourself a pass. I'm doing the right thing, but I'm doing it for the wrong reason. There's some ego in there. Yeah. But if you can do the right thing for the right reason, I think that's where we get peace. That's where we get joy. That's where we get resolve. And I'm here to tell you, it's not from the money. And if you're chasing that, guys, I just tell you, as an entrepreneur, what real joy comes from is depth in relationships, depth in trust, and most of all, learning to love yourself and be graceful to yourself. Yeah. And so I realize this is a little bit of a diversion, Kevin, but I think it's the very precipice, maybe, that some of my mentors modeled and taught into me. And I guess that actually leads to Stephen Covey, because he's the precipice. Well, 7 Habits of Effective People, and you know, his models are pretty powerful. But yeah. I think indeed that's probably one of the key things I learned from Stephen Covey. Yeah. Well, and you know, every bit of that is just applies in such a powerful way. And I really appreciate what you shared about, you know, you just intentionally been focused on, I'm trying to keep my ego out of stuff, you know, because it's hard to do. It is. I just went through a very public kind of little execution. And it's like, I thought I had my ego in control, and I found myself mildly pissed off at being publicly executed, you know. And it's like, yeah, okay, it's like, there you are, buddy. It's like, take a nap, be calm, it's okay. But you know, I think that when our ego's driving the show rather than our soul, when we let ourselves soul express, then we're just so much more potent on what we end up producing and doing. And the end of the day, the money's really, I know everyone, you say that and people say, no, I don't really buy it, but it's really meaningless. It's really hollow when we get to the top of that fame and fortune mountain. I just got through reading David Brooks, well, not just about a year ago, getting David Brooks' books, The Second Mountain, where the first mountain of fame and glory, and I've climbed that one. I've climbed it more times than I care. And you know what? It's like eating Krispy Kreme donuts when you get to the top of it. It's really hollow. And then that second mountain of impact and making a difference, I've also climbed that one. That's really meaningful, particularly when done in private, but it's not also the jam. Next time I talk to David, we're going to have a real powwow about the fact that he missed one, and it's the hidden high plateau of, do you like yourself? Are you comfortable with who you are? What's your relationship with deity? And that's really what I think we're all seeking, is just to be okay in the quiet moments in our mind. Yeah. You know, it's a friend of mine recently suggested that I read this book, Living Untethered. Oh, and love Michael Singer. Oh man, you know, and so now I went back. I'm almost done with that, so I went back and picked up his other 2 books, you know, and I'm excited to read through those too and stuff. And this whole thing of just
I mean, well, those books brought up stuff I had never even considered before.
Yeah.
I know, I'm kind of late to the party because those books came out
No.
a while
Well,
ago.
no. It's never late to the
Well,
party. It's
you know what?
okay.
You're right. It's perfect timing. It's in perfect timing.
Whatever the timing is perfect. Let me also suggest a book called Stillness is the Key by Ryan Holiday. It's
Okay.
maybe
All right.
a little simpler read and articulates Ryan's claiming as a Stoic now, so it comes a little bit from the Stoic philosophy, but it's also a beautiful book. And yeah, I really agree that Michael Singer, he captured some of the concepts pretty effectively. And
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of entrepreneurs listening to this. And it's like all the young bucks and buckettes, like, oh my gosh, Rich, it's just like quit going off on that. But it's what shifted me out of business creation to, if you will, I'm going to try fixing a little bit of this hot problem I created by really driving what really matters and stop dropping people into hell. And
Yeah.
it's not until you take care of your own junk and do your own personal healing and then stabilize and put the effort to your family that you actually can get peace and resolve. I call it the infinite entrepreneur. Balance in your personal life, balance in your family life, balance in business, and then alignment with how you invest and spend your money. And then at that point, you're on in flow. And for those of you can't see, I'm running a infinite symbol
Uh-huh.
in horizontal rather than how most people live their life. Zigzag, start your business. Oh my gosh, 52 times, Rich. Oh, drop on, make a bunch of money, get in balance for a second. Oh, get a bunch of wealth. Oh, drop your family into hell, and then get all your kids and grandkids deep addictions and let them climb out of hell for the next 5 or 6 or 7 generations, only to repeat the cycle in one family generation. So there's just far better ways to live our life than running counterintuitive to what our soul really desires us to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Rich, for anybody listening to this going, man, Kev, I really have appreciated this conversation with Rich. I really like who Rich is. I'd like to find out more about what they're doing. How can they do that, Rich?
Well, there's 2 ways that you can get to me. The first is richchristiansen.com, and that's just R-I-C-H Christiansen, CHRISTIANSEN .com. And then the family content, the stabilizing family content, is at Legato Family. That's LEGADO family, FAMILY.com. Those are the 2 best places to plug in. All the value work, soul expression, map exercise, value decision making, all of that stuff is on richchristiansen.com. And then the family stabilization is on Legato.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, Rich, I really am just so appreciative of you for taking the time to have this conversation today. And, the goal has always been, like I said, I want to, for the listeners, I want to just inspire them to place an intentional focus on creating more real, meaningful, rewarding, and profitable relationships in their own life. And we have definitely delivered on that today. And I want to just thank you so much for that. Any last thing that you feel led to share before we call it a wrap, Rich?
No, I think just the main thing that I'd say is maybe the best way to actually get a mentor is to be a mentor.
Yeah.
And when you see someone you really believe in, make sure you pass it on and believe.
Yeah.
I like to call it rock starring the nerds. I like to go and take them, a squirrely little weird 7th grade kid that I can find, and rock star them, turn them into a rock star and help them find their belief and identity. And when you see great capacity in someone, pour juice onto it. Never ever try pushing them into what your frame was, but push them to their brilliance. And I think that that's the final comment I'd make is we just get so much more by giving and lifting and building than we are destroying. And don't think for 1 second you're ever going to find true intimacy and true. You may get use, or you may get a tit for tat relationship, but you're not going to get true mentorship and true relationships unless you unconstrained give, go in,
That's right.
and seek the betterment of them and lift in a genuine nature. Our souls know, just fundamentally, they know when we're tit for tatting. And
Yeah.
so we just really encourage you to be a giver, not a taker.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Amen. Well, Rich, thank you. Thank you so much again for taking the
Thank
time
you,
to
Kevin.
have this. Really appreciate it.
Great to see you today, and be well.
Absolutely.